Hello, everybody. Welcome to another online event presented by the AES New York section. Today, we're doing an online tour of Sound on Sound Studios in Montclair, New Jersey. Let me introduce myself. I'm Roey Shamir. I'm a recording engineer, mixer, producer, part of the New York AES section committee. Everyone on our committee extends a heartfelt thank you to all of our viewers joining us today for an online tour of a popular recording studio, Sound on Sound, in Montclair, New Jersey. And it's a place that's busy, booked, and follows very strict, safe health policies. And after we get a little tour from our special guests today, we'll do some questions and answers. So, sorry, just having a little beverage. Let me start by introducing our guests. We have Dave Amlin and Tony Drewton joining us today. And we'll give you a little background on both of our guests real quick before they say hello officially. Dave is the owner, having successfully run Sound on Sound, Legacy, and MSR Studios for over 30 years. David has a broad career in audio, from engineering albums to coordinating broadcasts for network TV. After locating to New Jersey, he spent the latter half of 2017 building the new Sound on Sound Studios, where we'll be getting a tour today. I couldn't be in New York today. Forgive me, guys. I'm in the Caribbean. Our other guest, our other guest today, welcome, David, is Tony Drewton. He's Sound on Sound studio manager. A little background about Tony. Tony began his career at Unique Recording in New York City, which he ended up managing for 9 of his 13 years there. He then went on to manage numerous other facilities, including Sony Music Studios on West 54th Street, and Daddy's House, Platinum Sound, and his own Area 51, New York City, before teaming up with David not too long ago to manage Sound on Sound Studios at their new location. So thanks, guys, for being here. Super excited to have you. I'm just going to quickly just read a little bit about Sound on Sound real quick. Sound on Sound has been extremely proactive in putting COVID-19 protocols in place to ensure the safety of clients and staff. They are screening each session for their ability to safely execute the recording requirements while establishing number of participants and distancing measures. All clients and staff are required to wear masks unless singing or playing a wind or brass instrument. All surfaces of the facility are cleaned before, during, and after use. Equipment is also sterilized before and after use with isopropyl alcohol. They also have installed UV systems in all the HVAC units to sterilize the air returns into the facility. And they have direct access from the parking lot, and the building is a strict mask-only zone. Some of the larger ensemble recordings done prior to COVID-19 restrictions include Grammy-nominated Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Broadway cast recording. Great show, great recording. The Christian McBride Big Band, the Mingus Big Band, and Grammy-nominated Miho Hazama Big Band and the Hell's Kitchen Funk Orchestra. So obviously these guys are a little bit limited in doing large ensemble right now, but they're going to share with us a little after the tour and during the tour some great information about those kind of sessions, because eventually those kind of sessions will be back. There are plenty of other kinds of sessions that are going on currently, and hopefully we'll get some maybe no names and or secrets revealed, but some information about the types of sessions that are going on. So the other thing is that, as I said earlier, this place is busy and booked, and they actually have a client starting any minute now. Of course, it's on MFT time, which is musician folk time, for those of you familiar with it. So it may not be starting right at 3, but soon scheduled. So what we'd like to do is flip the script a little bit. You guys could say hi real quick. That'd be nice. And then we want to take the tour and then come back to this chatty environment later and see what we can discuss.
Sure. I'll run lead for now. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us, Roey, and thanks to the AES New York chapter for the time and showing us some love here and taking an interest in the facility. I'll be walking you through the facility. We'll try not to take too much time doing that. It's a fairly short tour, but interesting, I hope, for everybody. And then I'll rendezvous with Dave on the tail end of the tour, and we can discuss one of our bigger rooms, which is Studio A, and we'll talk a little bit about what Dave does while he's engineering in that space. So, Dave, you want to say anything before I walk through?
No. Hi, and thanks very much for having us. Greatly appreciate this. I hope this becomes a fun and informative tour for everybody, and let Tony take it from here.
Great. Roey, you got plenty of sunblock on, I hope, right?
Yes, well, it's a little rough, but if you could see, I got a little extra wind over here in the wind
Right.
department. But what I'm going to do right now to make the view even better is mute my camera, but I'm still here with you guys. Thank you very much. We're looking forward to the tour.
I apologize in advance if there's some dropouts because I will be mobile, and you all know how that goes. So here we go. I'll be going in between modems, and hopefully we don't lose you. So, and I have to mask up because I'm walking out into the common area and past some of my staff. And I'm going to reverse cameras and cross your fingers. Here we go. All right. So I'll take you outside so I can show you where we are proximity-wise. So we're in Montclair, in New Jersey, in scenic New Jersey. Great town, great restaurants. And we have, this is what we would call our upper level parking lot. We have a parking lot downstairs too. So we have plenty of parking and for an hour. And from the parking lot, you can walk right into our space. I won't show you the door code because I'll have to tell you what to do. So, and as you can see, masks must be worn beyond this point, and hopefully my staff has their masks on, otherwise they're in trouble. One of my staff members, we have a little reception area here. And you walk in, we've got organized chaos, our little tech bench, microphones, a little office area, and we walk right into our Studio B. And I'm going to turn some lights on so you can see.
And I'll just make a comment, Tony, that Studio B, the centerpiece of the control room is a Euphonics System 5. It's a very high-end digital console. The mic pre's, we have 48 channels of mic pre's on this particular model. Incredible sounding. So, I mean, it's a choice, great choice to use. We've done a lot of recordings using just the Euphonics mic pre's. And the board has been the most recent upgrade, I believe, like 2 years ago or so, where it's capable of handling Atmos in addition to 7.1, 5.1 stereo, whatever you want to do. And
very cool. Tony, I just want to ask you, when you're talking, to not be walking. Maybe we'll have a more stable, because sometimes you're muting. Thank you.
No problem. Sure. So, and as you may notice, this room does not have a producer's desk. So, Dave came to the conclusion that much of what we're doing in live tracking, and really the rooms are built around live tracking. We're obviously capable of doing a lot of things, but we really built the rooms to accommodate and attract live musicians and the capability and make sure we had the capabilities to be flexible to do large, mid-size, and small ensemble work. So this console has 48 mic pre's itself, and we do have 2 racks that float. We're working on this other Neve rack that you see, which is VR modules that we just acquired. That is going to be an additional rack that we have. But we have 1081s, we have the Focusrite, the GML, we have your atypical compressor, some choices, and our Pro Tools We have the Octacard, UAD bundles. They're pretty stock full of choices to use. The interesting thing, which I'll point out now, is that we have tie lines from one room to the other, live spaces, control rooms. We've got, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, 48 analog tie lines.
48 analog, a couple video tie lines, and a couple Cat5 data tie lines, which could be used for video over IP, audio over IP, or in our case, we use it for our Avion Q systems.
So we can combine both
I'm
rooms.
sorry, one thing I could also add, it can also just be used for straight internet, which can be patched if you needed a hardwire internet feed going right into the modem.
So we have frequently, and we have quite a large booking. I have in the calendar, I'm working on a cast album for a Broadway show that's coming in at end of August, early September, which is quite a substantial amount of musicians. And we're working through all of the detail, safety-wise, union approvals, both stage and actors union and musicians union, and how we're going to break up these musicians. And you'll see the two spaces, but you can combine both live rooms, combining for 6 isolation booths. The Studio A live room is about 1,250 square feet, including 4 ISOs, and this one is about 650 with 2 isolation booths. And I'm going to walk you, I'll stop talking, I'll walk you down the hallway into the live room.
Just a couple of plaques there, huh, Tony?
Just a few.
Just a few, buddy. Just a few.
So this is the Studio A, Studio B live space. We have, we're set up for a session in here, and when Roey said we were busy, we're not kidding. I think with the booking I just got, we're probably booked every single day now, including the weekends, knock on wood, through mid-September. So we have really been busy, and I want to make sure you understand that we're busy, and that's with me filtering out quite a lot of work that we're passing on because we don't feel we have the capability to do it safely for not only the client, but ensure the safety of our staff. So I've been passing on quite a bit of work. And, just to give you a degree of some of the things we're doing, we are doing some band recording. We've been doing a lot of podcast work, audio books. We've been doing vocals remote with Zoom, and we have a phone patch. So we're doing remote recording, a lot of that where people don't want to be in the city or elsewhere. And we're getting quite a bit of business from out of town. People know that we're being careful. I myself just did a panel for NAMM with Zoe from Studio at the Palms and Pat from Ocean Way about operating in a COVID environment. And we're trying our best under the circumstances to make sure that we're trying to think of everything we possibly can to make sure that we're sanitizing the studio.
That
and
was a great panel. That was a great
distancing.
panel, Tony. That was a great panel, Tony. Sorry to interrupt you. We're going to try to post the link for it in the comments.
Great. So anyway, getting back to the room, we have 24 mic lines. We have 48 of these, 2 panels, 48 mic lines in each room. SLS for playback, 2 speak-on connections for the analog cues, and 2 Ethernet connections. So for the private cue systems, we have the Avions. We have 18 of them. So we have plenty of
Hey, Tony, one thing you can just go a little bit to the right of that panel, like very particular here about the electrical, so that we've split it up where we have isolated, grounded electrical for all the audio equipment. And then we provide clean, well, I wouldn't call it clean, just dirty power, which the white outlets are. So this way, if people are bringing lighting in or stuff that's not audio specific, it's not the microphone power supplies, we have a way of segregating the grounds on the 2 systems. So that way it keeps the audio as clean as possible. It's kind of old school.
Yeah. So we're basically, and this room has a C7 Yamaha. We have the 2 isolation booths. One of them is a bit in disarray. We've been a little sloppy these days. I usually have this normaled a little better, but we have 3 drum kits. We have about, I think it's 50 music stands, about 40 chairs, 70 sets of headphones. So again, this room gets combined with the big room quite often. You see one of our 2 Wurlitzers. We just acquired a second one because we're going to be having a Wurlitzer battle next week. I'm only kidding. We do have 2. So I'm going to walk down the hall now. I'll stop talking.
I'm going to put my mask on because I imagine I'm going to have a visitor pretty soon.
Yeah, so I'll go into Dave and I'll show you this room first. I'm going to put my mask on too. Again, I got to put my mask on. I just reminded myself that there's Dave.
There you are.
We're in stereo. I don't want to get a feedback loop.
Now, you know what I can do is I can mute my my thing right now.
So here we are with a Musgrave modified 72 channel. You should mute that because I am hearing. There we go. We're good. Neve VR. This took 3 months to commission with all the work that we did on it. We did quite a bit of work refurbishing this console, getting it up and running, and it's purring like a kitten right now. You know, much not like a lot of other facilities, and not to condemn other facilities, but because we do so much live tracking, and also because we're fairly new, we've only been open a little over 2.5 years. We're approaching the 3-year mark, actually. But we really have to make sure that everything is working, because when you have 30 musicians in a room at a time, not that we're doing that right now, but you can't say 1 second, this bucket is not working right now, hold on, and you have 30 union musicians sitting in a room waiting for things to get repaired. So we really stay on top of our maintenance. And I'm sorry, I got a phone call in the middle of that. We're really staying on top of our maintenance, and the rooms are working really good, really well, I should say. So you could see the angle. There's Dave. You could see the angle into the live room from here. I didn't mention we have the Augsburger systems that sound fantastic. They are custom with the super tweeters. You know, we have Jenny's, we have NS10s. We're old school, but old school is a good school. Everyone loves the fact that we have your standard monitoring. And again, no producer's desk because the racks happen to be in the other room right now being used. They float.
Our Roey DBX 162, which is actually a fairly nice sounding stereo compressor. And then the rooms just have very minimal outboard. They have a Tube Tech program equalizer, a DBX 160, an Ultra Harmonizer, and a 480L. And that's it for what comes in the room without the roll around racks.
Oh, and a 480L, which you mentioned.
Yep.
So I'm just going to show you the kitchen real quick, and then I'll go into the live space, which is I like to call it the Big Kahuna. Right. But yeah, Dave, you could join me if you like. But then we have a little kitchen area, 2 bathrooms. There's 2 other bathrooms in the outside area. So, you know, we have 4 bathroom spaces for the larger crowds that we get when we're doing the bigger ensemble work. You can see.
Tony, was that the machine room that you just went by?
Yeah. Thanks, Roy. Show you. We have separate machine rooms for each space. So we're running Bryston's, and you know, we are HD. So you could see we actually just had some air conditioning work done in this room just to get a little bit more air coming into it. It was a little warm, but that is now repaired. Our wonderful Neve power supplies, which it took us 6 power supplies to get 2 that actually worked properly. It's quite a process.
Hallelujah.
All right, and now the Big Kahuna, which Studio A, approximately 1,200 square feet. And We have 4 ISO booths. From left to right, we have ISO 1, ISO 2, ISO 3, ISO 4. We have just a few guitar amps
Just a few.
to choose from. And at B3, actually it's a C3, is in wonderful condition. We just had the pedal board worked on and a bunch of repairs done to it, just tuning it up a little bit. That's a 9-foot Yamaha Concert Grand. Another Wurlitzer, and this Fender Rhodes is interesting. Dave just bought this from John Williams, who was the chief tech at Sony Studios with me back in the day. And that is the original GRP Records Fender Rhodes that we acquired.
Nice.
So
Bob
this
James.
room has,
Oh yeah.
again, 48. You'll see the panel down there. There's the back of Dave's head in the control room. And another 24 right there. We have, and I forgot to mention that each vocal booth has the same connections, Ethernet, speak on, as well as 16 mic lines in each ISO booth.
So you have 4 ISO booths, Tony?
We have 4 ISO booths in this room and 2 in the other.
Great.
So, yeah, and so, in this room, we've done quite a bit. We've had a bunch of big, and this is, of course, before COVID, but we did a small orchestra, a small ensemble for FedEx PGA tournament with engineer Dennis Wall. I'll drop some kudos to Dennis, and it was literally 8 French horns, massive horn section. There was a cimbasso, which I had to actually look up. So it was a big brass section. We had 30 musicians in here, and I don't want to steal Dave's thunder, but really depending upon the engineer and the instrumentation, people are using the room differently. For instance, we had the Christian McBride Big Band in here, and that was a massive band with, I think it was 5 trumpets, 5 trombones, 5 saxes, drums, piano, guitar, upright bass. And these are some big, hard blowing musicians. And the engineer on that project, Todd Whitelock, a wonderful, very talented engineer, decided to deaden the room up. So we covered the entire floor with carpet. We actually rented in a curtain system and covered all of the wall surfaces and window surfaces with velour curtains, made it totally dead, and used the second room for that. For some of the musicians, we had the saxes in the other room and the main horn sections in here. And I forgot to mention Joey DeFrancesco was on B3. He brought his own B3 in here, so we had to get a Leslie in the mix also. And so we're constantly changing our setup based on making the recommendations of where we know the sweet spots in the room may be, based on what the requirements are for the recording and the taste that the engineer might prefer as far as placement, dead, live. We've actually had, when we did the Hell's Kitchen Funk Orchestra with Dave Kowalski, they opted to put people in ISO booths and leave all the doors open, not close them. So they didn't necessarily want to isolate everybody. They wanted to have the live feel to it, but they did want a little bit of isolation, and they basically inset people into the isolation booths. And I'll give you, just a glance of this ISO booth here. This is the biggest one. We've got 4 Starbirds. We've got tons of, Atlas stands. So that's pretty much the tour. That's pretty much it.
Okay, cool. So just one thing that you explained with Todd Whitelock deadening the room. Dave and Tony, what did you guys think of that result? Did you like it, or is it something you found that you would recommend for certain recordings again?
I think it depends on the project and the choices the engineer and producer and the artists are making. I mean, that's not my personal favorite way to do it, but the results were great. So I can't argue with the results.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. So Tony, why don't you return to where you're comfortable please, and
Sure.
we'll do a little interview of you guys, a couple of technical
Yeah.
things.
I'll just sit where I'm comfortable, which is
At the drum kit.
behind this. Yes.
Very nice. Well, feel free to add any rim shots, if anything is.
I'll
humorous.
do a couple of bumps during
Exactly,
this. Yes.
and a crash. Just as long as Zoom doesn't crash. Cancel. Okay, so let's see. That was a great tour. Really appreciated it. And obviously you were talking about mostly about operations before the shutdown. And we're going to talk a little bit in the course of this conversation about what's been going on after the shutdown. Because you guys reopened, what, is it almost 8 weeks ago? Did you reopen?
Yeah, I think about 8 weeks ago, exactly, yeah.
Cool. That's great. So, yeah, let me see here. I want to start a little bit with Dave and a little bit of technical information.
Sure.
Dave, you've owned and operated many studios in and around New York City over the last 30 years. Can you give us a little history of your journey and of those facilities up to and including Sound on Sound there in Montclair, New Jersey?
Yeah.
And also, how long did it take you for construction and setup of the new place?
Okay, so the original Sound on Sound, which was on West 45th Street in Manhattan, started pretty much open 1987 and survived until 2005. And lots of gold and platinum records. I mean, by my rough count, over 150 million units sold worldwide from what we did. Lots of fun and total diversity. So
This
I mean, everything.
This explains the large number of plaques for the fact that you guys have only been open. When did you actually open the studio?
January of 2018.
Right, that's what you said. So
Or 2.5.
that's quite an impressive amount of plaques to have gotten in that amount of time. So obviously, some
Yeah,
of them are
some
from
of them are missing,
your
but we have-
earlier facilities.
Well, so some of them are missing, and I have a box at home of some others that Tony was just like, there's no more room on the walls. Let's just leave these ones for now. And it was like, okay.
You got to have a couple to bother your wife with the decor at home. So
Oh yeah, no, she wants them up more than I do. It's really funny.
that's good. Sorry to interrupt.
But the original Sound on Sound, it started as one room, and it was an interesting time to open. I mean, open a studio in 1987, and you have we were literally open in August of 87, and there was a stock market crash in October of 87. It was like, it changed a lot of the way that people were spending money, even, in the recording studios way back when. And so we got kind of caught up early on as this budget tracking place. And suddenly we were thrust into this, well, you're either going to go for broke or you're going to be out of business. And very quickly, I mean, made significant upgrades and went from a 24-track overdub place to a 48-track studio within a couple of years. And we were really lucky on a couple of fronts. And also, I mean, it's luck and hard work, but back then I was so young, I'm going to attribute it more to luck. But we did the right things. We listened to the right advice, and we got the right people in for projects. I mean, our first one off the bat was Living Color. Have Mick Jagger come in to produce a project when you're open 2 months, and the album goes platinum and lots of accolades around it, and word of mouth. And that still to this day, word of mouth is what gets you business and keeps you busy.
Some really great musicians in that band as well.
And then so in addition to that, lots and lots of jazz. As soon as we opened, we became sort of a destination studio in New York for jazz. And it was a thrill to me because you get to meet your heroes. So rock and jazz people that I grew up listening to are coming into the studio. So that was pretty amazing. So, start out with one room. And after 4 years, we were able to get the funds together to take over another floor in the building. Okay. Fortunately enough, the floor right above us, we were on the ground floor to begin with. So we had the second floor, put our B room in. That became really, really popular with Puffy and with a lot of the hip hop guys in New York, and also with a lot of rock people. It was just a great mixing room with a small to mid-sized tracking room with an ISO, and very, very popular. I think that's kind of between the two rooms. Once I put the Neve in Studio A and I had this SSL in B, we were good. We were pretty busy for the most part. And just over time we grew. The Sound on Sound went from 2 rooms to 3 to then 3 plus 2 production rooms, one that was leased out to a subtenant. And then 9/11 hits, things change, not so good. The following year, and as I understand this, and it's anecdotal, but I'm told that a lot of people came to New York in 2002 because they felt this obligation to support the city, and then they disappeared after that. 2003 dropped, 2004, it was like we fell off a cliff. And at that point, we were like in a lot of trouble, and we were pretty close to going out of business for good. Very, very interesting that I got a call completely out of the blue from the late Simon Andrews, who owned Right Track Recording. Now, when I opened, it's kind of interesting that my engineer at the time, like the other main employee that I had besides myself, was a guy that had worked at Right Track, and a lot of our early things that we were trying to implement were trying to be like Right Track, because they were one of the top dogs in New York from the early 80s on. And a lot of great things, like detail on the technical end, detail on grounding, detail on the air conditioning. I mean, I think I went a little further than them on isolation and the build of the studio, but I didn't learn that until many years later when we actually joined forces and merged our business operations. And that was what happened in 2004. I get a call totally out of the blue from Simon. And by the end of the conversation, he just sort of dropped a bombshell on me. He's like, well, maybe we should merge our businesses. I was like, okay. That completely threw me for a loop, because in the 15 years I'd known him prior, I don't think he'd said more than 3 words to me in a single sitting. So very interesting turn of events.
Well, he was quietly observing.
Yeah, whatever you want to say, sure. Simon's a very interesting guy. I mean, he's a very, very sharp businessman, very much understood like how to create an environment in a place that really appealed to his clients. Very interesting, though. I would say that, a lot of great qualities, but as I got to work with him and got to really know him, there's the other side of him where he wasn't so great when things weren't so great. And that sort of happens at times. I mean, I think it hit him pretty hard when the business in New York started to have a downturn.
Yeah.
And
well, when there's trouble in paradise, that's when people's character kind of shows.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah. So we were able to make a go out of it. And it took us 3 lunches to come up with a deal from beginning to end. And it took our attorneys 4 months to actually ink it. But once we had that done, there was this transition period we were going to do. And Sound on Sound, literally, we moved into Right Track's facilities, but we shared all the expenses and the operations. And there's a very weird sort of merger in the sense that we didn't actually merge the business entities, we just merged the operational aspect. And there were a lot of financial and legal reasons behind that, some of which I agree with to this day, and some of which kind of bit me in the butt when things didn't go so well. And that literally, like, the next part of the story is it was all wonderful for 3 years, and then suddenly it wasn't. And it was absolutely horrible for a year where we were involved in a protracted, ugly lawsuit. And the upshot of it was when all the dust settled, I was able to take over the 48th Street facility, and the 38th Street facility closed, and Simon and Frank Filippetti, who was a minority partner in the interest, left. And then I had MSR in the city for another 9 years, I believe.
Manhattan Sound Recorders.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's yet another one. Manhattan Sound Recording was actually a very short-lived little endeavor with Jim Flynn, with the late Jim Flynn, who was a good friend of mine for many years. During the year that I was embattled with this crazy lawsuit, Jim was like, hey, Dave, no, you got to be back in the studio. Let's do this together. I believe in you. Let's make it happen. Boom, here you go. And we opened up this little production place, and it actually survived for about a year. And I think just, timing. but it got me back in actively dealing with stuff while all the other crazy stuff was going on in my life. And it was a nice, really wonderful that he wanted to do that. So
Excellent.
MSR was the successor to Legacy, which was what we called our joint venture, and being a successor to Right Track and Sound on Sound individually. Great studio. I mean, I think between Legacy and MSR, we did 90%, 95% of all the Broadway cast albums, which, not for the faint of heart, I got to tell you. Those are pretty tough, demanding sessions.
That's
I know
part
we're
of
going
what
to
I'd
talk
like
a little bit about that, yeah.
Yeah, that's part of what I'd like to pick your brains on in a moment.
But I mean, what's interesting is that while all this is going on, you know, Tony is over at Sony dealing with stuff on another level as well, like incredible, coordinate all these moving parts with teleproduction and music. So, I mean, I think between the two of us, that's one of the great things, like we realize that we
Tony had something between, I think it's either 18 or 57 rooms that he was running. I could never get the full picture of it, but it was quite an intense operation that he was running.
And I mean, for us, it's like we had 2 buildings at the height of Legacy for the 3 years that things were wonderful, and the 6 months prior where I was in the planning stages with Simon and with Frank about how we were going to make all the changes and what we were going to do. Because one of the big concerns was Sound on Sound had catered, you know, very strong urban clientele, and we had other clients that were really great as well, but they weren't selling or booking the kind of time that the urban clients were. So one of the whole goals of this joint venture was to be able to get Right Track's base of their their high profile, the Mariah Careys, the Jennifer Lopez's, people like that, but also get all the urban acts that they weren't getting in addition to the Broadway shows. And we were able to pull that off. So, but that was quite a lot of moving parts.
Yeah,
47,000 square feet in 2 buildings.
Wow.
And managing the infrastructure, it was a lot of work. I mean, at our peak, we had 42 employees. So it's a big operation.
I visited once in a while with an occasional session, and I was usually around the corner at another unique, infamous place.
Yes.
That we don't have to talk about today so much, unless, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about Tony's history as well. But
let me just really quickly, you asked.
By all means.
Sound on Sound here.
Mm-hmm.
So Legacy, later MSR, we kept it going. And unfortunately, there came a point where there was so much outside noise intrusion from hotels that were being developed in the Times Square area. It started with the place you used to work. That building came down, and 47th Street building, 701 7th Avenue, was physically like the bricks were connected. They were touching each other. There wasn't any space. So when the owners of 701, who turned it into a Marriott Editions hotel with an Ian Schrager club, when they started to tear it down, they didn't technically raise the building. They did what the city likes to call an alteration, which is such a stretch of an alteration. But by keeping the frame, they were able to grandfather in the 12-story building steel subframe and use it to hang a billboard that is bigger than any other billboard in Times Square. And this little, kind of interesting interpretation of what an alteration of a building is caused us headaches for years and years, because they literally jackhammered off every piece of concrete on that steel structure. And when they got to the point where they were in, the 12th floor wasn't a problem. Once they got to 7, we started to hear it because we were parallel with their 4th or 5th floor. And once they got to 5, they just killed us.
Sounds very similar to what happened to Media Sound, unfortunately. The construction in that area was too much of an obstruction for them to continue as well. At least that's the story I had heard at the time.
Well, Media didn't have it go on for 3.5 years before the worst of it. Media had the point where they were jackhammering into bedrock, which we lived with for 8 months. I mean, that was a point where we literally could not do a single session between the hours of 7 in the morning and, depending on how late they went, as late as possibly 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I mean, that was sort of the end. And when the dust settled on that, I mean, my landlord had cut a really weak deal with the owner of this development. And I basically hammered my landlord. I was like, here's the deal, buddy. I can't make money. I can't pay you. Boom. Here's what I've lost over the last 3 years. How are we going to deal with it? And the developer of the building gave us some money. The landlord forgave us some rent. And that was enough for me to basically walk out of there with my tail between my legs and try to figure out what's next.
And hence the idea and the carrying on of building your new facility.
Yep. And that's how Sound on Sound in Montclair. And I decided to go back to the old name because I feel like the history of that studio, still a lot of people in New York remember it. And,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And technically it's a cool name also. It's a nice tribute to Les Paul and
yeah, exactly. I found that out after I came up with the name when I was checking into an AES in 1985. I didn't want to be Dave Amlin schmo walking around looking at equipment with my tongue hanging out, like, so it's like I came up with a name on the spot.
Very good.
Yeah.
Cool. So, all right. And so the overall construction time from when you started the facility and until you were ready to start doing sessions, how long was that?
Well, that
how was that?
Kind of amazing is that we took out what was here existing office space in the middle part of May of 2017, and then by September all the basic infrastructure was in place. I mean, literally like 3 months of steel, multiple layers of sheetrock, AC, electrical, sprinklers, and then another 3 months of wiring and finish. So by December, we were ready to roll, except as Tony said, the console in A, which should have been ready to roll by January of 2018, had other plans. And the power supplies basically, if I can be so blunt, they shit to bed on us. And that was the end of that. And I had to search for new power supplies and try to rebuild the ones we had. And at one point we had 6, and we were able to get 2 that we were very happy with, rebuild 2, and sell 2 of them off. So.
And since then they've been behaving themselves. Amen.
Knock wood, they have been, yeah. So this room opened up 2 months after Studio B, but I think in some ways that was a mixed blessing because it gave us time to sort of acclimate and get used to the new place. Not that Tony needed it, but I think I did more than him.
Got you. Okay, very interesting, and really not too long of a period to get rolling from inception to delivery of the baby, as it were.
Tony's always commented how quickly he thought it was based on other experience that he had.
Sure.
Me I mean, between the mechanical work, the wiring, all the finishes, the console installation, just to me, that seemed very quick. Yeah, I mean, I would have thought it would be a year and a half. It took less than a year,
Yep.
So.
Most excellent, because we definitely need more large recording facilities in the tri-state area, as many as we can get. Okay, so unless, Tony, you want to insert anything else about that last question, I want to take it over to a little bit about the subject of Broadway soundtrack albums and a little bit of technical information. Tony, you can definitely give us some input on the setup and how you organize these things as well, but I want to start a little bit with Dave on technical. If you could share a little info on what's involved in setting up for those sessions, like the floor plan, the placements of mics, where you put the musicians, which mic pre's you prefer to generally use, concepts behind that. Do you ever incorporate a deca tree? Those kind of questions. How many assistants are on these type of dates? Do they use both facilities at the same time?
Let's to going backwards. So assistants, generally there's going to be a Pro Tools op on a Broadway session. One of the assistants that's what they're going to basically be, married to the Pro Tools screen the whole session, manage the track layouts, manage the templates, just make sure that everything is good and that all the backups are handled accordingly each night. Then you have at least 1 or more roving assistants that handle live rooms, because invariably something needs to be checked, moved, somebody's having a problem with the cue feed because they forget the big or the small knob adjusts the volume or their track. So it's always something that comes up. But the whole key, and this is something that's kind of like that Tony and I grew up with, and you grew up with this also, Roey, that when I came into the industry, somebody said we're starting at 10 o'clock. It didn't mean we're unlocking the door to the studio, powering the stuff up, going to the closet, getting breakfast, taking a crap, coming back in the studio. You know, it was like, no, 10 o'clock rolled around. Guess what? If we weren't ready to roll at 10, we didn't start recording any later than 10:05. That was it. And it was born out of the whole doing jingles and sessions for records and film, where it's boom, 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 get it done. All right, 3 hours, don't go over, because then you got to pay the musicians more. So it was a different mindset, and Broadway still unbelievably adheres to that.
Sure. There's a lot of union involvement, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, they have their mandatory 15-minute breaks in the middle of the sessions, only so many sessions a day, lunch breaks between the bigger set. I mean, it's a lot of, yes, union regimented.
Yeah, I mean, I want to, let me chime in for a second.
Sure, by all means.
Not just with Dave, but with since I'm the guy answering the phone and talking. I'm sorry, I'm getting, my phone is ringing at the same time. As I say, talking on the phone. When we get a phone call, no matter what the large ensemble is or whatever the session is, there's the screening of what do you want to do, when do you want to do it, what's your budget. With the larger cast album and large ensemble stuff, it's what's the instrumentation, how many cast members are there. They have a pretty good idea of how they want to stage it. Usually, if the engineer is going to make recommendations as to how to stage it, as far as whether it's rhythm section, what the cast, how to have the cast come in. It's not, everyone thinks, oh, we're doing a cast album. At Sony, we used to do that because we had very, very large rooms with a lot of isolation capabilities. We would build isolation booths out on the main stage, and we could literally have, Phil Ramone with Elliot Shiner or Frank Filippetti or whoever it was come out, and we'd build a drum booth out of gobos with a ceiling on top of it, and we could section and do the entire cast, including the vocals, simultaneously. They would do leads as overdubs, but in most cases, it's the rhythm section first, and then some array of how the vocalists are going to arrive and do their performances as well. So once I get that mapped out, then it's a matter of figuring out, okay, here's a floor plan, and that's whether it's Dave or anybody. And, Dave is the chief engineer and the owner of the studio. But when he has a session, I ask him the same questions. I'm saying, what room are we putting these musicians in? What positions are we putting them in? What is the mic choices you have? Some people know our staff, so they're requesting particular assistant engineers, or they're asking me for my recommendations. And if it's jazz, if it's classical, whatever the style of music is, rock, we have guys that, let's not say that they can't handle it, but they mix a little bit better with that type of music or that client base or the technical aspects of what's going on. And like Dave said, it depends. There's a point where we say, okay, this many people are going to be here, and how do we manage that many people? And just imagine having 20 people show up all at the same time trying to get headphone levels, so everyone gets their headphone on, and the engineer's sitting in a room saying, can you hear me? Can you hear me? And half the people don't know how to use a private cue, an Avion system. They don't know the knob, a knob from a switch. And, they're fantastic musicians, but they're just not technically proficient. So now you have to have someone who's running around the room, adjusting headphones, changing, and most of that is vetted before they get here, because like Dave said, we will spend sometimes 2 days setting up. We've actually had some sessions where months in advance, we bring the entire staff in and we set the entire setup just to practice it before we do the setup. So we really want to be prepared so that when all these musicians file in And it's not just musicians, because then you're talking about the music director, the finance person, copyists, the stage manager, the composer. And sometimes there are more people coming than the musicians themselves. And it's not just the logistics in the room, if I can segue into my world a little bit more, but it's what are we eating for lunch? Does everyone want coffee when they show up? How many bathrooms do we have? Where are they parking? Do they have directions how to get here? Because you can't have 90% of the band here and they're like, oh, well, the drummer got lost, so everyone's sitting around for 45 minutes making triple union scale while we're twiddling our thumbs. So it's all of those things that go into coordinating that, making sure that our staff is incredibly trained and knows the room better than anyone else, so that Dave is not going to be sitting there 24 hours a day watching what they're doing and having to babysit a session. We have to have people that know the ins and outs of the rooms, the consoles, Pro Tools, mic placements, and it's a massive team effort. So it's really about building that team, and then every single individual session is screened to the smallest minutia of it. And hopefully, if we do our jobs right, we don't run into a lot of last minute things that we haven't actually accommodated before.
Right.
So that's
just to remind the audience, we're talking about operations before today. There's a little bit difference to it today, and Tony's going to cover that. But
yes.
We're trying to just share with you guys a little bit, and you gals, a little bit of the background of what's involved in a large session of this type. So I was given some floor plans. Could you tell us a little bit about the actual session that we're going to look at? Maybe just a little background of what it was. I know it wasn't necessarily a big cast album. It was a little smaller, but
but what's interesting about it is called Wanda's World, and a client that I dealt with over the years in New York, and I think Tony might have dealt with also, but Michael is a great guy, and it's his company actually brought it in. I think he's producing and overseeing it, and it wasn't straight to Broadway. This was one of those things where, so the economics of Broadway really, really quickly are, you have a big show on Broadway, you make a lot of money, but the shows that don't make it to Broadway can also make a lot of money by setting up a touring thing and licensing the show to high schools or colleges, stuff like that. And that's where they make a lot of their money as well. So this one was one of those where it was a touring production and licensed, but still needed to have the same treatment as if it were a big, Ain't Too Proud kind of soundtrack. So what you're looking at here is the Studio A room, which we used for the musicians and one of the lead singers. And then the other one that's up on the top there, the B room, was used for the background vocalists and the other lead singer. So there were a total of 3 leads at any given point, and then I guess 8 background singers. And if we go back to the A map, we'll see what the instrumentation was. Okay, I'm trying to read my writing. Wow, yeah, I had a 3-piece horn section in one of the ISO booths because I want to take advantage of the sight lines to the band leader who was playing piano and keyboards. We had
drums in A1.
Drums in A1, yeah, I can see that.
I think it's violin. V or V.
Oh, it was violin in ISO 3? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I forget.
Or 2. Yeah, I can't remember either.
Yeah, so that's ISO 2 had violin, but it was also, right. So it was for violin, but it was also, no. That's vocal ISO, V ISO 3. That was the third vocalist was in ISO
and then
2
guitar.
Yeah. So I had to lay it out in a way where between the cameras in both rooms and the monitors, that it could be set up so that there was almost seamless communication between the 2 rooms, and they weren't thinking about, I'm looking at a screen, wait a minute, what are they trying? It had, and that's something that we did the day before the musicians and the singers were here. We meticulously went through it. But one of the things I did in the B room, which you have up right now, is I set it up so that the backing singers, and I'm sorry, there were 9 of them, they had to be isolated such that, because that's a smaller room, and we couldn't do that today, by the way. We would not be able to do this session the way we set it up today. Yeah. Probably would have had to be done in 2 separate sessions, musicians and then singers, where we could socially distance them right. properly. But in this case, there's a pair that are next to one another, and then where you have people kind of at a 90-degree angle, taking advantage of the microphone's polar pattern rejection, so that 2 people standing 90 degrees, this one is not bleeding into this mic, and this one is not bleeding into this mic. And it was just take advantage of what the actual equipment can do and use it the way it's meant to be used.
I see you have blocks that I assume are gobos.
Those were the gobos separating different sections, yes.
So did you guys make your own gobos, or are you using Tetrix
No, we made our own.
Cool.
I made my own from day one, and with the exception of the big room at Legacy A509, we always had, custom built gobos.
Cool. What's that little word there in the middle of Studio B with a C or something?
Conductor.
Oh, that's the conductor. Okay, very good.
No, oh, that's the camera. That's a little word with the conductor looking at the camera. So that way, the pianist, who is the musical director sitting in Studio A, could actually see the return there. I think the one thing missing on this display, because we weren't sure exactly where we were going to place the video monitors, that's the one thing missing in this display, is where do we actually put them? And one of the things about the way the place was designed, so having had MSR in New York, and then also before that Legacy, we did so many Broadway shows that we knew how to link the rooms. We knew how to have multiple video cameras in each room going to a split screen that you could either look at as a split screen or select individual cameras. So this way, multiple studios would be linked together, but it's still one big session, like everybody's in the same room.
Very cool.
Yeah. And that, by the way, interestingly to me, is toward the end of MSR, when we shut down, Avatar, before they shut down, actually put in something similar, because they had one of our old techs as their chief engineer. So it works.
Well, it was a combination of the relationship between the facilities and also where technology was going at that time, with interconnecting and not always having direct line of sight in the facility, especially in New York.
Sony was great with that. Sony had shared machine rooms. We shared with the video department. Everything had tie lines to the main stage.
The famous Dave Smith DB25 interconnection system.
Yeah, and we, we did the
Rest
score
in
for
peace,
Shaft.
Dave.
We did the score for Shaft, and we had Isaac Hayes' entire band in Studio B and an orchestra out on the main stage, and everyone had to see each other, see the film, see the conductor. They had the score scrolling, locked to SMPTE on separate monitors, locked to Pro Tools with 3348 redundant backups going on. It's a big production.
Definitely. And amen for what it stimulates in terms of our industry at so many levels. So that's a lot of information so far. Let me just ask you a couple more specifics to remind you. Generally, Dave, the mic pre's do you like to just use the Neves, or do you like to use external mic pre's? Or is it based on the instrument that you choose? So
here's an interesting thing on that. So when I had Sound on Sound, I had a pretty extensive collection of tube and ribbon mics from like 50s, 60s, early 70s. It's probably about 30, 40 microphones that fell into that category. When we were doing these larger Broadway shows and the film scores, once I was partnered up with Legacy, most of the engineers were like, that's nice that you have a bunch of 67s. I want to put 87s on everything. This way, and I was like, but 67 just has this certain sound. Yeah. And they were like, I know, but if in the middle of the session a tube decides to get wonky on me, I don't want to have to take time to break it down and change it. Condenser mic, boom, it's up there. I know it's going to work. We're done. And so I sort of echo a little bit of that philosophy on some of these bigger recordings. to go with simpler. Although, like knock wood, our tube microphones are reliable, so we can use them and not worry about them failing.
Right.
The console mic pre's, the V mic pre's are wonderful mic pre's, so I have no problem with them being the front end. And the added benefit is I don't have to look around me to go change something if I need to make an adjustment right in front.
And generally you use like the direct out as opposed to the bus matrix?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny. I think Al Schmidt uses the insert send outs, but
Sure.
The only downside to that is that the fader doesn't provide any volume control or mute capability.
Right.
So
maybe that's not by accident.
Yeah, maybe.
Because there's less chance for interruption of signal. Maybe.
This is true, but
there's also a couple less op amps in the circuit if you come from there.
Well, I'm not actually sure if there is, because there's an op amp to balance the signal going to the send. So I'm not really sure. Yes, it's less circuitry than going through the busing, even direct out.
Right.
But I'm fine with the direct outs. They're pretty reliable, so I don't worry about them.
Very cool. Very cool. So another part of that question that I'd ask, do you ever incorporate the Deca-Tree in your method? And if so, is it a small one, a large one?
So we had a Deca-Tree when we had the big room at Legacy, and that was basically a 4,500 square foot room with 35-foot ceilings. So the Deca-Tree got used a lot there. Once that room was closed, it sat in a closet basically for the next 9 years and never even got looked at until I sold it. So we don't have any real need for one here. It's too small a space to really take advantage of it. But I have gotten interesting at times. I've done mid-side on a room for string overdubs, and
That was another question. So I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, so mid-side is great. I actually, in the room behind me, where Tony's sitting, I actually think it's incredible because it does give you like a greater, almost like a 270-degree panorama on the sound. And then you can play with the center and side balance later if you didn't feel it was right during the recording.
Sure, more options.
But it's a tool. So is a Bloomline stereo pair, although that has not really come up here yet, except when we were kind of doing a practice session.
Just to see what you would get out of it.
We did that on drums, and it was kind of funny. We put headphones on and listened to the rooms. It was like, oh my God, what's going on?
Yeah, better go Bonham. So, or Johns, depending on how you look at it. Let's see. Yeah, I think we covered the large ensemble concepts and your background on it. So you mentioned having that huge collection before. What kind of mic library do you have now, without revealing too much because we don't want any visitors? But do you still have a plethora of ribbons? Do you have a plethora of LDCs? Do you use any SDCs, et cetera, et cetera?
We still have a nice complement of large, small diaphragms. I mean, when I closed MSR, as I said, we were basically really beaten up after 4.5 years of just like loss of business and, you know, just everything going on. So I did sell off about 2/3 of the microphone collection I had, which at the time was about 180 microphones. So I still kept a healthy number of mics. And I went through and I kind of picked what I liked, which, you know, we had 1087s, and I decided, well, we should have 4. And I went through and I actually tested all 10 of them before I decided which 4 I was keeping.
Kept your cherries, as it were.
Yeah, meticulous on that with all the microphones. Cool. So, I mean, having had 5 47s at one point, I got great money for the 3 I sold off.
Sure.
I mean, I kind of miss having 180 mics because it was like a kid in a candy shop.
Sure.
You could go in at any point and go, I want 3 of those and I want 4 of those. And it's like, well, you got it. But it's not necessary. It is nice, though.
Yeah. Well, I know 2 other people in this Zoom room right now that also have 181 mics between them. So we can relate.
Yeah.
Some of them are sometimes useful to you as well. So, okay, let's go into the other subject, because we do like to keep the Zoom-itis from developing, and we're getting into about an hour now. So, and it's been great so far. Thank you very much for the insight and the tour. But Tony, we want to ask you a little bit, and Dave as well. But Tony, from your perspective as being the manager and having to deal with people first before they actually are in the session, the studio's been booked and busy since it's reopened. But how has COVID affected your operations in terms of how you implement policy and practices in your studio and recording sessions? I mean, you kind of covered a little bit of it already with the tour, but if you could share with us a little bit, and I'll actually put up a document as you're talking that will probably reiterate what part of what you're saying that you provided me.
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, you know, we had months to think about it. Let's put it that way, because we were shut down as of March 16th. New Jersey shut down, so the entire operation closed. During that time, we did a lot of research, and we were watching what the CDC was saying, and you know, what other recommendations were as far as state, local, the Grammy Association, and you know, what other people were talking about as far as numbers, distancing. We did some pretty in-depth research on how to clean microphones and technical equipment, as opposed to, you know, microwaves, refrigerators, doorknobs, faucet handles, door handles. So we had a lot of time, and I'd say the first 2 or 3 days that we opened back up, Dave and I started an Excel spreadsheet, and we walked from one end of the facility to the other and said, that has to be cleaned, that has to be cleaned, that needs to be cleaned, this needs to be cleaned. What are we going to do about that? We need a solution for this. So we came up with a very in-depth list of, let's call it, cleaning protocols for our staff to accomplish. And, you know, and I'll tell you, after I did the NAMM conference, or before the NAMM conference, it's funny because the panel that I did with Zoe and Pat, I was reading an article on doctors' offices and dentist office and how they removed all their magazines from the reception area, from their waiting room. And I was like, and I came in the next day to Dave and I said, you know, we should get rid of all our magazines because people are going to be picking them up. We don't want people picking up Billboard and reading it 5 different people and infecting the same magazine. And he's like, do you really think we should do that? And I'm like, yeah, we definitely should do that. And it goes everything. Think about like a coffee machine. How many people are going to be lifting up a pot of coffee and frequently touching the sugar bowl? So, you know, you really, unfortunately, a lot of the things that you don't necessarily think about, the conveniences that you think about, you had to think about, and you had to come up with policies as to whether you were going to continue operating the same way. So we came up with a long list of cleaning policies. We went into the control rooms and said, okay, if there's 5 Herman Miller chairs in the control room, then 5 people are going to want to sit next to each other. Let's get rid of some of these Herman Miller chairs. And we came up with a list of numbers of people that we felt were comfortable and safe to have in the common areas of the studio. And then we looked at the actual technical areas of the studio, or I should say the live rooms and the ISO booths. And we're letting common sense dictate what we're going to do. So for instance, in the room I'm in right now, I can have 4 people in each, 1 person in each ISO booth. And I've got about 1,000, maybe 800 square feet, 800 to 1,000 square feet of a big live room to distance people in. And I could put people in each corner of these rooms with all the ISO booth doors, and they'll have 20 feet apart from each other. And I could have 8 people in this room right now. So what would be comfortable increasing that? Well, what are they doing? Is it a brass band, you know, tubas? Is it violins? Do people want to record a string section like the atypical way of recording it, where you have, you know, violin 1, 2, 3, 4, viola, and everyone is in a section shoulder to shoulder, some people sharing the same sheet music? no, so the answer to a lot of it was no. How can we creatively accomplish that for you and still maintain safety and comfort for the musicians and the staff, not endanger anybody, and still accomplish what you're trying to capture at the same time? So the short answer to it is every single session has a lot more discovery going on. Let's put it that way. So when someone's booking time, and I'll give you a good example. I had someone wanted to do a video shoot in the big room, and they called up. They wanted B3 drums, bass, guitar, 10 background singers, and a lead. And I said, well, can we divide them up into all the rooms? We'll connect the rooms. We'll have video cameras. No, we're shooting video. They need to all be in the same room. Not here. They're not going to be. Unfortunately, the answer to that is no. And I mean politely, because I can't, people are trying to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish. But, politely, you have to say, I'm sorry, I don't feel that's safe. And for you or for us, and is there anything else we can do to alter the instrumentation or what you're trying to do? So eventually they came back. They ended up not using the instruments. They've shrunk the background singer's size down drastically. And we did the session. Everyone came in with masks on. Everyone was unbelievably respectful. We've got hand sanitizer in every space of the facility, disinfectant soap in the bathrooms. Last week, and it was not a cheap investment, Dave decided to put UV sanitizers into the air conditioning system. So all of our air conditioning systems have UV sterilizers in them now. And every time I see some new data or information on the dangers of or mistaken assumptions about dangers, because sometimes we're being overly cautious, which I don't think we can really be. But, we're trying to maintain a business while maintaining safety. It's not an easy thing to do. The other aspect of it is, luckily, we're in a state that, and I don't want to get political about it, but, they've really driven the numbers down. The vast majority of the population, including other people in our building and the area that we're in, everyone wears a mask. We're really careful as a society around here. So, with all of that said, it's a mixture of discovery when it comes to picking and choosing the types of sessions we can accomplish, making sure the staff understands what the protocols are, making sure that we're cleaning as much as we possibly can the entire time before, after everyone is here, and a lot of prayer. I'm not a religious guy, but honestly, it's a matter of just hoping that we don't have a situation, because in this, we really don't know. It's still undiscovered territory. We've gone for 8 weeks. Very well. People are actually, and I'll tell you, not to give my competition an up, but being this cautious and being this safe and being this smart about it is an absolute incredible selling point for the facility, because people know, besides our technical proficiency and prowess, what we already are able to accomplish, that we're acting in their best interest with a conscience, and we're really trying to maintain safety for everybody here, and it's a tremendous selling point for the facility.
Absolutely. If someone is going to try and do it in this day and age, then it's good to know that the place they're choosing is not oblivious and is trying their very best to stick to safe guidelines. I think you guys are doing a stellar job.
Yeah, I mean, location also, I have to say,
it's still up for debate if any of it is safe, but you're making your very best efforts to make it safe, and that's great.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I mean, look, and the location actually has been advantageous to us also, because we are in a suburb that's has very close proximity to the city and other cities around us, and free parking, as I mentioned. You don't have to go up into a 10-story building into an elevator with 20 other businesses in the building. So that's also a selling point and an attraction, and a safety car and safety factor as well. Absolutely. Yeah.
Hop out of your car basically right into the room.
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing. So 2 things you said in there that I, me being the question asker that I am, do you feel like now every gig is sort of like a Broadway soundtrack in terms of you have to check into and scrutinize and double check the reliability and make sure that people understand how to get there and how they have to get there? And is it almost the same amount of work?
Yeah, well, no, it's actually more work because I am absolutely screening things much more. And for instance, urban pop sessions. I like to draw the analogy that it's a lot easier for me to guarantee your safety in our live rooms because they're so big than it is in the control room. So where you have 5 producers, with a drum machine and MIDI controller or USB controller, and the producer, the songwriter, the artist, their girlfriend, the A&R guy, we can't do that anymore, unfortunately, at this time. We've had, and I'm not saying that people don't understand that because they've been very respectful of the decision, but I've passed on quite a number of sessions because this, when someone calls me up for studio time, the first question I say is what you're doing. The second question is how many people are coming. And when they say, well, we have 5 people coming, I say, I can't do that. And I say, look, if it's a rap session, the artist, the songwriter, and maybe the manager and one other person, you choose, grandmother, girlfriend, whatever it is.
And that's because you have an assistant and an engineer to consider in the room.
Because
and it becomes 5 people in a control room.
Right.
It gets to be a little bit much after that.
Yeah, and even if it is 3 people, then the assistant stays out of the room. Another aspect which you just reminded me of is, for instance, you have a band in the room, and we've had a 5-piece rock band in here just recently. Everyone doesn't go in the control room for playback now to listen to what they did. We set up monitors in the studio, in the actual live space, and we do playback from the studio now. So, it's a different world, and we absolutely, I distribute the protocol list to everybody so they understand when they come in, they have to wear masks. I literally tell them if their grandmother shows up in a wheelchair, no disrespect, if she's not on the guest list, she's not coming in. I have to know exactly who's coming here because I'm telling my staff to flag me if someone is not on that list and clients take advantage of the situation, and I will stop the session. We're not messing around. So, we really want to make sure that we're drawing a line in the sand for client and staff safety together.
Very cool. And on a technical question, just because I have not a lot of experience with it, but I've been told that while UV light is very good, despite what Donald Trump said about sticking it where the sun doesn't shine, the UV light has some safety concerns of its own. So I assume you're running it at night when no one is in work or at
no,
time.
it's actually in the ducts themselves. They're not actually in the
Roey,
space.
We looked into that whole thing about the UV lights, and the big problem is if you get any that are really effective, and you don't handle it precisely and keep parts of your body away from the areas, you can cause a precancerous situation. Right. So we were like, no, we're not going to do UV light cleaning of the consoles. We're going to use isopropyl on all the surfaces.
Right.
That we do.
So you're using it to filtrate the air at sometimes, or all. My understanding was it creates a particle that falls to the ground. That's what it does to the particles in the air. It makes them heavy, and they all come to the ground so that they can be swept and cleaned. So where you're putting it in the air filter system, maybe the filter is taking care of it.
Exactly.
But
it's taking care of it before, and you're also talking. What it's doing is eradicating the particles. That's what it's
understand.
doing.
Very cool. Excellent.
Eradicating the bacteria.
Hopefully it kills the common cold too, because that would help.
Absolutely.
But when Tony mentioned this session the other day that we had going on in here, we had that system basically. We ran it in a fan mode afterwards for hours and hours just to make doubly, triply, quadruply sure.
Sure.
Any
residue was cleaned out.
Yeah, I mean, these are all people work together, but you don't know. You can't take chances. You got to be smart.
Yeah, because you never know who's running into who when they go food shopping or anything else. So the crisscross.
Yeah, I mean, you have to assume that anyone walking through that door could be asymptomatic.
Exactly.
I mean, basically.
Right. Yeah. So that was very informative also, and not to be, Debbie Downer with our whole panel discussion. Let's just talk a little bit about something else. And then after that, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the comments of Facebook, because we're going to read them soon. And if not, that's cool also, but feel free to ask. So a little bit of philosophy. Where do you guys see commercial recording studios going in the future in order to be cutting edge, in order to be accommodating? Let's assume that sometime, hopefully by 2024, COVID is like contained in some kind of a semi-normal world. Sorry to be downer about it, but I think realistically we've got many years ahead of us. What do you see the future for commercial recording studios? Like, what will keep them cutting edge? What will keep them the right thing for people to do? I know you have a large facility, so that's sort of an answer right there, because I can't do that in my living room. But
it's also not just the
for
large
any studios. I'm saying for people that own studios, maybe that are watching, that are much smaller facilities. What do you see as a good way to be cutting edge and to keep your place viable and fresh and to survive in this really rough economy for studios?
So one of the things, I mean, it's sort of when we opened here in 2018, I mean, in addition to selling off 120 microphones, I also sold off probably 90% of the outboard that I had. And the reason for it was that what I noticed was that the majority of my clients, and I would say majority being like 99%, they were concerned with what microphone and a good mic pre on the front. And everything else was sort of secondary. Even compression seemed to be sort of secondary. It was just mic pre and microphone. So the whole idea of, at one point at MSR, I had 40 channels of 1081s, I had 1073s, Millennias, I mean, all sorts of like goodies. I'm kind of sorry I didn't keep more than 8 channels of the 1081s, just from a selfish standpoint, but the consoles in both rooms have incredibly clean, great sounding mic pre's on them. So that, I mean, one of the interesting things, Tony mentioned an engineer that did Big Band, Todd Whitelock. When he used to work at MSR in New York, we had SSLs in 2 of the rooms, and he always brought in a ton of outboard mic pre's. Now that we have the VR, he can bring any mic pre's in. And it just sort of speaks volumes about the difference in perception about the front end of an SSL versus an E.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you my perspective. Look, technology's changing, the market's changing, and commercial studios are of varying sizes. We come from the world, when we think of commercial studios, we think of large format consoles, tape machines, big, small, mid-sized monitors. But there's a lot of commercial studios that are 2-track and hip hop vocals right now, and have 2 or 3 small production rooms with ISO booths that are doing fairly well, because that's the market that they're in. As a studio manager, where I've seen the most success for me is to never have to say no to anything. So to me, it's diversity of services. The fact that we have large live spaces is phenomenal, and you're right, Roey, that what we offer is something that you don't do in your house normally. Most people don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of microphones, vintage microphones. They don't have the isolation. They have kids running around the house. They don't want strangers in their home. I can't tell you how many people have come here now because they don't want to bring people. They don't want to bring people into their homes with their families now with COVID right now, but they didn't want to anyway, because, who wants to bring 5 band members into your house while your kid's doing your homework and your wife's watching, Breaking Bad, binging Breaking Bad. So for me, it's diversity, and it's being able to say, yeah, we can do ADR, we can do a foam patch, we can record an audio book, we could do a 4-piece band, we could do a 30-piece ensemble. And I never have to say no to anything. So when someone calls up I'm not just saying, well, I can't track live drums because we don't have a big isolation booth. We have a huge isolation booth. If they're two-tracking a vocal, we're setting up some gobos and we're doing a hip-hop session 5 minutes later. It's kind of like being a musician. If all you do is play clarinet, polka music, you'll be playing Oktoberfest once a year for the rest of your life, and you'll never have another gig. So for me, it's about being able to have a bunch of different services, a diverse staff that's capable of handling all different types of musical genres and client needs, and that's really what success is going to be. And technology can change, but it's the acoustic environment and your capabilities, and the more capabilities you have and the more diverse services you have, the more people are going to come to you. So
I could add to that is that the fact that Tony and I and Roey, yourself as well, I mean, we all came up during the era when that was expected. That we bring that to it, and there's no cheating the experience and the knowledge. You really can't. And I think a lot of people forget that. The one thing that I'm glad we have a great crew here. Post-COVID, it's a lot smaller crew than it was pre-COVID. But the guys that are here, they're getting the direction and the encouragement so that, 20 years from now, they're going to look back the way we look at stuff.
Absolutely.
Be able to pass on the knowledge. I mean, that's the important thing.
Sounds good. All right. Well, at this point, we've had some nice viewership, but we don't have any questions from the audience. We'll give them a second to realize we're going to close this up in a minute. I want to thank you guys for some great insight and for sharing the facility. I hope that people that are trying to operate their businesses commercially can learn from how you guys are operating and some of the policies you've been implementing. Definitely want to thank you both for your time and wish you the best with continued operations in today's session. And in addition, definitely want to thank all the officers on the AES committee. We keep trying to keep cranking out great panels. We don't have another one scheduled yet, but we'll be letting you know soon. We might take a week or two off to have a little holiday. I'm in a good location. I want to go swimming. But we'll be getting it together, and you'll be hearing from us soon with some more great events. Definitely want to thank Eventide for all the support they give us. And we'll post in the comments the email for anyone who wants to contact Tony or Dave to discuss a possible booking. They're very happy to talk to you. And also, I know Tony's very open to just sharing information and mentoring. If any of you of our student viewership have questions, get in touch. They may not be hiring now, but you never know. When you're in the Rolodex, you might find yourself with an internship or an assistant job in the future. So thank you both on behalf of the AES New York section. We appreciate your time. It was a great insight, and good luck.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Roey.
Absolutely. Stay healthy, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Guys, hang in the room for 1 second. We're going to drop Facebook.